This edition of WOW, or Women of Worth, is brought to you by the Shirin Fozdar Program of the Singapore Management University. Tonight in WOW, a voice from the past. The late Mrs. Shirin Fozdar speaking some 30 years ago about the aims of the National Council of Women of 1975, a national advisory committee for women's affairs.
The objectives were to see that women got equal rights in every respect of marriage and divorce, inheritance, equal pay for equal work, equal facility for education and entering our professions. That was what every women's organization around the world was trying. And so we too had the same aims to see that women in no way suffered from any kind of handicap.
Also tonight, we hear one of the most vital voices leading women's empowerment in Singapore, the chairperson of the Shirin Fozdar Program, Chiang. Two women speaking decades apart, giving us two different vantage points into being a Singaporean woman then and now, in the first of a special 6-part series on women in Singapore. Welcome to WOW, or Women of Worth. I'm Michelle Martin. Shirin Fozdar is remembered as an outspoken advocate of women's rights. She played a key role in the development of the Women's Charter of 1961 and helped establish the Singapore Council of Women. Born in 1905 in Bombay, India, Shirin Fozdar's passion for social activism was clear from an early age. Fozdar taught the untouchable caste of children in Ahmedabad to read and write. When she came to Singapore in 1950 with her husband, polygamy was not only common, it was an accepted custom. Prominent men would proudly show off their 5th or even 6th wife. Fozdar was concerned about the lack of women's rights in divorce and marriage within this historical context. In an oral history interview of 1982, she recalled her early days in Singapore before one man, one wife was a phrase that was institutionalized, when she talked about the memory of a man who had married 67 times.
One man had married 67 times and went on divorcing, and the ground for divorce was that the wife had asked him where he was at night and why he had come home late. If she made that statement, then she was finished. She had to get out and he would divorce. So in such a society where women all the time had to worry about the security of her marriage and her home, how could she have the heart and the time to train her children in the right manner?
In November 1951, Shirin Fozdar and a group of women activists in Singapore met to discuss the formation of an umbrella organization to provide a united voice for the various women's organizations then existing in Singapore. Following this, the Singapore Council of Women, or SCW, was formed in April 1952, and Shirin Fozdar was elected the honorary secretary. Throughout the 1950s, the SCW campaigned actively against polygamy, and as the honorary secretary of SCW, Shirin Fozdar wrote to prominent community leaders and government officials, and even the Colonial Affairs Office in London, to fight for marriage law and monogamy.
Because the British government, when we appealed to them to change the law, they said that they did not want to interfere with the local customs and local law. Although we did argue that the British had interfered in India, where they had stopped the sati, burning of widows. You have the Union Jack flying over your head, and the same flag flies over the heads of women in England. But women in England are quite secure as far as their marriage laws are concerned. And here there is no security because a woman can be thrown out of her house anytime.
Fozdar also met political party leaders to lobby for the cause. The SCW's persistence paid off when the PAP included women's rights in the party's election manifesto in the 1959 election.
When the PAP brought out their manifesto, the first thing they said in their manifesto was about one man, one wife law. And I admired their courage that they were not worried about losing the votes of men. Every other party was afraid that if they sided with women, then men would not vote for them. But PAP was not worried about that.
The Women's Charter was passed by the Legislative Assembly in 1961, effectively outlawing polygamy and providing fundamental rights for women. In 1961, Shirin Fozdar moved to Thailand to help destitute women and young girls, using her own savings as well as donations from patrons to build a school so young girls would be empowered by education to choose a path other than prostitution to be able to support themselves. Coming up, what's the link between Mrs. Shirin Fozdar and Chairperson of the Shirin Fozdar Program, Claire Chiang? Find out after this.
Add to your wow factor with Michelle Martin in the Wow Club on 938 Live.
You're listening to WOW, or Women of Worth. This special edition of WOW is brought to you by the Shirin Fozdar Program of the Singapore Management University. We hear Chairperson of the Shirin Fozdar Program, Claire Chiang, open up about her own life lessons and how meeting Mrs. Shirin Fozdar herself impacted her. Welcome to Women of Worth. I'm Michelle Martin. It is such a privilege to have with us in the studio one of the most recognizable voices in the arena of the fight for women's rights here in Singapore, Claire Chiang, Chairperson of the charitable trust fund, the Shirin Fozdar Program. How are you, Claire?
Great. Thank you, Michelle, for giving me this opportunity.
Oh, what a joy to have you. Claire, tell us a little bit about Shirin Fozdar. She was a pioneering women's rights activist. She played such a key role in the legal protections of women, establishing the Syariah Court. She played a role in the Women's Charter in 1961, its development. She's one of the most progressive and enlightened voices for women's equality and women's rights here in Singapore. But tell us about how Shirin Fozdar sharpened your own convictions as a feminist.
This woman born in 1905, my gosh, that was like, a century ago, remained still very alive in my spirit because I'm still doing that fund, or rather the Shirin Fozdar Program at the Wee Kim Wee Center at the Singapore Management University. I learned a lot from her when we first met in Bangkok. Slight woman. I thought I'm small, but I've met an even smaller woman. And she was already in her 80s when we first met. But that spirit was sky high and strong. And the takeaway from her during that period, when I was still sort of like fiery feminists to look at the world through the lenses of merely simply the women's perspective, she said to me, Claire, don't run ahead so fast and on your own. Take the men along. Walk alongside them. It might be slower, the journey, but it will be steadier and it will be a partnership. And that is what community is about. And there's a beautiful quote by her that I have kept close to me about humanity's the two wings, the male and female, must beat in unison for the bird to ascend heavenward. Therefore, regardless of gender, equality of opportunity is the birthright of all. So she taught me to scale down my feminist individualism, contextualize it in the gender partnership, men, women, and the community, and to respect the responsibility and right of both women and men, to develop the strong I in ourselves as women, to create a better we in the community, including the men.
This is very interesting because I think Sheryl Sandberg's famous arguments in Lean In have been criticized as coming from a viewpoint that emphasizes rugged individualism. But here you're talking about the sense of relativism or relational aspects.
I think we all need to start with a strong I. I think that lack of self-understanding is going to make you ineffective. It is so important that through education, through engagement with community issues, through participation in all civic activities, joining NGOs, etc., that one reinforce and strengthen the I. It is not qualifications I'm talking about. It's really about life education. It's really about empowering the self-understanding and creating and finding that goddess in you. The strong I then becomes an effective capital to interconnect with the community, or start off with your partner, with your family, and then the community. Without that self-understanding, there's not going to be that self-effectiveness or the efficacy to be able to be a solution for the community. So It is rugged individualism, no doubt, but it has to be contextualized. And I think that's where probably the Asian wisdom comes. That we contextualize our self-understanding, our gender understanding within the bigger fabric of society and how it works to make it effective, to create that climate of equal opportunity for all.
You provide a very unique perspective because you've met both Germaine Greer, and some would say she is a real icon in the Western model of feminism. And here we have Shirin Fozdar, who you have met, and you carry on her work as well. How do you reconcile what both have brought to your life?
You know, Germaine Greer, when I first met her, she was really feisty and she was addressing the advertising world. And when I asked her, what do you think millennial women need today? And she looked at me, she said, this is a tough question. Just do what you want and what you like. And Shirin Fozdar will say that do what you aim at and do it together. So in a way, if you put the two women together and they're of decades apart, they will actually complement each other. I think we need both. We need all thoughts, all actions for women empowerment. There's some very good at advocating. There's some very good at relational aspects. Some very good at simply writing about women's affairs. So I think we need all talents. The important thing is to continually respect each other and to strengthen that I notion in womanhood and in humanity. I think we're here to talk about the goodness of community. And I happen to be the women as the capital to help to promote that. So I would like to see myself first as a persona. And because I can see myself having both the male and the female qualities in me. So what I do is to actually adopt the repertoire of masculine and feminine skills at different situations.
Because it's a continuum within us all.
It's a continuum. I think I see very gentle men and I'll see very rugged women. I've seen very assertive women and I'll see very kind men. I think all these are qualities we should stop genderizing.
Yes.
And stereotyping gender.
Absolutely.
We should just see there's human qualities that men and women can employ and apply at different contexts, different situations for different purposes.
Add to your wow factor with Michelle Martin in the Wow Club on 938 Live.
More from Claire Chiang on Wow or Women of Worth after this. Stay tuned. This edition of Wow or Women of Worth is brought to you by the Shirin Fozdar Program of the Singapore Management University. Tonight, two women speaking decades in between them. They're united by history. We heard earlier from Shirin Fozdar, the late Mrs. Shirin Fozdar, thanks to the Oral History Centre of the National Archives of Singapore. And you can hear more from Shirin Fozdar at www.nas.gov.sg/archives online. We also heard from Chairperson of the Shirin Fozdar Program, Claire Chiang, advocate, entrepreneur, author, and who in October 1997 became one of the first women to be a nominated Member of Parliament. More now from Claire Chiang. When Shirin Fozdar did her work in Singapore was still nascent in terms of nation building, developing a Syariah Court, women's charter. Where are we now in the evolution of women's rights, in your opinion?
I think we have got a lot of protection. Always there will be areas for improvement. What I am most concerned about is that confidence factor in women. The statistics have shown that despite all the education that women have acquired and higher than men, the wage gap has not narrowed. And you look at the statistics on board diversity, Singapore is about between 7 to 8% lower than average and low compared in Asia Pacific. Why is it so? I do not know. I could only see that because the trend in women's employment, they sort of drop off after 35 or at 40. Therefore, they're no longer in the marketplace to compete and to be visible, to be nominated to top positions. That's one. Two, even for very qualified women who are at work, very often when you ask them about taking on bigger positions, there's always a bit of a hesitance. Whereas the men will say, I can do it. The woman will say, let me think about it. I think the confidence gap is definitely there. And I'm trying to see why. I think it is in transition. I think we are at a stage where we know we are good, we are qualified, we have the opportunities, but I think there's not enough role models or the praxis out there to show the way. And there's also lower level of mentorship and sponsorship because the men are still there and they don't see the women. It's not because they discriminate. It's that in the habit of working and looking at the world, they spot the male talent first.
Unconscious bias almost, because
Exactly.
we promote in our own likeness.
Exactly. So if the woman dropped out of the market due to family concerns
Yes.
and responsibilities, they're even less visible to be spotted. And when they stayed on, all the doubts about whether or not she is half-time here or half-time at home worrying about children, all that prejudice also sleeps in. So women work so much harder to have to prove themselves and to be visible. But unless they stay on course, unless companies have more flexible workplace, where women can choose to work maybe flex time, part-time, and project time, in order to then become fully engaged again in employment, you will find that women are disadvantaged because of their duties to home. So in Employer Alliance, which I am chairing, we are looking at companies designing flexible work in terms of place of work, in terms of the time of work, in order to encourage women to stay on course, stay at work. And when the children grow bigger and with leveraging technology, you can shore up your skill sets again and compete in the marketplace. So my call to women is stay at work, stay cognitively, intellectually alive. Do not give up, because you can have both, the family and work. You can have courting, dating, work excellence, and family.
Well, that's such
you
an
can have it all.
optimistic
You can have it all.
message there. But, does it lead to a lot of anxiety on the part of the woman trying to have it all? Do we value the woman staying at home? Is that still seen as a value choice?
For me, homemaking is a significant contribution. But I will say we need to encourage homemaking with a difference. I would, for example, consider looking at every home should have a computer with a broadband and with teaching lessons, with content curriculum that men who stay at home to continue learning, even for the silver community, that after 65 they have a computer home they can continue to learn courses, etc. So I think the anxiety about not working, there's also anxiety about working.
Yes.
So what do you do? So it is really positioning your frame of mind to ask at a stage of your life, what is your priority? What is it you want? You don't have it all at one time, but you can have it all over stages of your life. But you need at different stages to prioritize what is important to you. How best can you allocate and mobilize your resources to get going? So that self-understanding and self-clarification is the $64 million questions that all women and men partners have to ask. We may not be able to have it all at one go, but in partnership and in collectivities, we are able to work out agendas that help to promote this possibility.
What holds women back in Singapore? I put that question to Claire Chiang. Hear more after this.
Add to your wow factor with Michelle Martin in the Wow Club on 938 Live.
We're listening to the first of 6 special parts in this series of Women in Singapore. We're hearing from Claire Chiang, who said, all my different activities are united by this core of values: justice, feminism, community development, and self-awareness. You're listening to WOW, or Women of Worth. I'm Michelle Martin. Good to have your company. What concerns you about what holds women back in Singapore?
The confidence factor is one. Organizations that do not provide the climate for transformation to tap the talent of women is two. The dominance, male dominance at home.
We're still a patriarchal society in the domestic
seeing
realm.
that, all duties at home are the job and the work of women. And the lack of support by the community for the aspirations of women to want it all. So each of this is a barrier, and not that they are not surmountable, but it does require women themselves to realize that this is really what they want and fight for it. They have to then design for themselves a life planner to determine their own priorities.
Can you share with us your life planner?
It wasn't so rational an approach. It's there was a lot of chance encounters. It's like Shirin Fozdar was my chance encounter. She changed my destiny from academia to business. She came to me when I first met her in Bangkok in the late 90s with 2 cushions. And she said, and these 2 cushions were from Yasathon, from Thailand, in the northern part of Thailand, where she was doing a lot of her work in the Baha'i faith.
Yes.
And she told me, if you help me with these 2 cushions, I can put 1 girl child to school. And just that time, my husband was doing the hotel business. I said, if 2 cushions can help one, I buy 200 cushions, 200 women, 2,000 cushions is like a village, yeah? And I thought then I could actually propose a retail business in a hotel group. And I wrote a proposal. And I went to visit Yasathon. I wrote a proposal to the EXCO and said that, well, I start the business, the retail business in Banyan Tree. And that's when I left university and went to start the Banyan Tree Gallery in hotel group. And that became irreversible. I left university. I started to look all around at communities, women who are weaving, doing porcelain work, doing fabric weaving and wood carpentry, anything that women's craft work excels in. And lo and behold, I thought I would start with 1 shop, but now I'm running about nearly 80 within our group. But that actually brought me to the understanding of work being a very dignifying engagement.
Yes.
Whether it's in the village or whether it is at home or whether it is a cleaning job, etc. Work in itself is an engagement which I feel is uplifting. So honoring all aspects of work, honoring women's effort or honoring the human effort, it's something that I feel young people and people today need to reconsider.
My Journey and After, your biography that sold out in 2011 after its very first run. The book was written in Chinese, but for our English-speaking audience, can you give us a sense of some of the key lessons? This is a big, big question because there's so many lessons, marriage and motherhood and community engagement and politics.
Right.
So let's start with the I. What shaped this incredible sense of self for you?
I think empowerment is a journey. I've said so often to the young women that the way you see Claire now is not because Claire is better than you. And I don't want to be that role model. I may be at best the learning model. And any learning model means there was a journey. And the journey started since childhood, living in Singapore, growing up in the nation-building years, and absorbing a cluster of values that parents have taught you. So I think if there's any few things that I feel had been pertinent to my development, it's that in my journey, doing is so important to me. I don't sit down and simply think about issues. I am a doer. So I'm a doer, organizer, planner, executioner. I do things. And that doing teaches me more about mistakes, about how to do it better. So I believe in the school of thought about doing and impacting on your cognitive development and in shaping my value systems, because I acquire through experimentation and learning to do it. I also learn to do the mistakes and then improving on myself. So doing is important for me.
I'm trying to get to the sense, a deeper sense of your personality as well. You do so many things so well. Are you not a perfectionist, or are you a perfectionist?
No, there's a second thing. I'm not a perfectionist. I believe you do the best at the stage, at the level best, at the point you know how. But that may not be the perfect expression. But you learn. So after I've executed a task, I will always do a debrief with myself. How could I do that better? How could I say that better? How could I write that better? So in that sense, I can be very punishing on myself, some people would say. Therefore, I'm not perfectionist, but I work towards perfection at that point of time that I know what it is. But I don't believe in reaching what I think is perfect, then I do. No. Doing, performing, execution is all the continuous tense. And I believe in that engagement continually. So I'm hard on myself, but also set standards, and I like to be the best. And I always see that tomorrow will be another day.
Claire Chiang, who said women should capture their inner strength. It is a wonderful resource. It was a privilege to speak with the chairperson of the Shirin Fozdar Program, Ms. Claire Chiang. My thanks to the Oral History Centre of the National Archives of Singapore. You can hear more from Shirin Fozdar in interviews on their website, www.nas.gov.sg/archives online. This edition of WOW, or Women of Worth, is brought to you by the Shirin Fozdar Program of the Singapore Management University.
Add to your Wow Factor with Michelle Martin in the Wow Club on 938 Live.